So we really find ourselves at a very interesting touch point. We have citizen scientists alike, as well as cosmetic chemists who have been in the industry for decades, really showing us this new generation of founders and a emphasis on science-backed brands, and just really, I think, harnessing the creative potential of beauty in a new and exciting way, delivering effective and transparent products to consumers. How we came here, it feels a bit, of course, an aftermath of the pandemic and, the kind of increased interest in ingredients and science, but also, these brands present an interesting counteract to more Instagram and influencer-led brands. At last but not least, of course, biotech is providing us with some really interesting ingredient possibilities. And obviously, you will give us a little bit more detail, but just to sum it up succinctly, sweet chemistry and mother science brought game-changing molecules into the beauty realm. Veracity unlocks the vast power of metabolic and hormonal health, and Jupiter is breathing new life into the scalp care and dandruff category. Now, obviously, launching brands like this is an intensive investment in time, capital, and resources. So I'm curious to hear from each of you, what was the determining factor for taking the plunge? And Maria, we'll start with you.
To us, the determining factor for taking the plunge was that our curiosity led us to finding something that had a highest purpose. We didn't intend to start a biotech skincare brand, but we did discover the molecule. And that luck of being able to find something new, and then the privilege of being able to characterize that molecule and its properties with some of the best scientists in the world. When we learned what that molecule could do for skin health and for beauty, we knew that the highest purpose wasn't just publishing papers in the JID and the JAD, which is something that we did and brought me a lot of delight, but the highest purpose is to make something that transforms everybody's lives who uses it. And that's why we decided to launch the brand Mother Science.
Awesome. So my story starting Jupiter is a personal story. I was working at a consulting firm. My boss had just sold the company for about $80 million, and I had made $0 million. I was in my office, scratching my head, having a little bit of an anxiety attack. What am I going to do with my life next? Where am I going? And I looked down on the desk, and I saw a pile of dandruff. And for a lot of people, you would think, that's disgusting. I did as well, and I said, well, how do I get rid of it? Looked at all the options on the shelves, didn't know the difference between any of them, didn't want to use any of them. So I had probably just enough stupidity and hubris to say I can do it better. And that set off really the story of what we're doing today. We ultimately launched a fake brand online to see if anybody wanted to buy this or anybody else had that same issue. And it turns out that it wasn't necessarily people who look like me, but women who are really looking for an elevated salon quality product that also had the efficacy that they needed.
Yeah.
I hope that everyone can hear me. I have 2 small children, and they have infected me with all of their germs. But anyway, my story is also a personal story, but a health journey. Long story short, I was going through infertility and sent for testing. And it was very casually told to me that I had this disease called Hashimoto's, which is a thyroid disease. If you don't know, your thyroid is a critical gland in your body, really responsible for all your metabolic and other functions, hormone functions. Was given the very Western medical treatment of here's a pill, here's more drugs, and let's try things until you break. And a couple years later, I finally sought out the care of a functional medicine doctor, and it transformed my life. As you may, I gave away the punchline, but I have 2 children now, and I've actually been able to reverse my Hashimoto's through the power of a functional health approach. And so that is what I wanted to bring to the world, but through a format where we weren't waiting till, shit hit the fan or you were at your lowest point in your life, but bringing this power to the way that people are thinking about taking care of themselves every day and the problems that they're concerned about. And so our goal at Veracity is to get people science-backed, drug-free alternatives, and also through our content and education to help them be better CEOs of their own health.
Great. Okay, my story. I actually, I've been in the business a while. I started in 1990 as a chemist for Pfizer L'Oreal Group. They switched me to marketing in the mid-90s. I figured I would be consulting for the rest of my career, and I had no plans on being a founder. I've worked with too many founders to want to be a founder, but I met a potential client, and that client happened to be a bunch of scientists that came out of Columbia Laboratory for Stem Cell and Tissue Engineering. And when I saw the work they were doing in developing technologies and biomaterials to basically tissue engineer and repair damaged organs for transplant, and basically to be able to wipe the organ transplant waiting list globally, I was blown away because after 35 years, I figured I'd seen every mushroom peptide there was, and I figured I would just be sort of marketing some new fun ingredients. But when I opened the fridges and there were human organs in the fridge, and I saw their work and they're going into human trials, and these remarkable peptides or matrikines are able to repair and regenerate all sorts of organs, such as heart, liver, kidney, and skin. I decided to get an SBA loan. I'm sorry, I'm hyperventilating because I put my apartment up as a collateral, and then decided to launch. And people kept telling me founders do it because they can't help themselves. And yes, I used my retirement, my only asset, because I believe so much in this technology. And then also, I believe that there is progress to be made in formulation integrity. And I was going to just take that to the grave with me by myself. But since this peptide matrikine came out, I thought, okay, we're going to bring a new way of formulation as well as this peptide. So that's why I pressed the trigger.
Yeah. Well, and Alec, I'd love to, given your former life as a claims chemist, I feel like you really understand, the balancing act of, injecting the sexiness into science or weaving storytelling into statistics. So what are your thoughts on the evolution of the intersection between science, claims, and marketing?
Jeez. Okay,
in a nutshell, yeah.
I was actually first QC for Pfizer, then claims R&D, and a VA, value analysis chemist, who looks for cost savings and reformulation. So yeah, back in the day, 1990, I remember marketers would reluctantly come out to the lab in their Manolos, because 1990 was Manolos, and they used to sort of walk around in their stilettos, and they couldn't wait to go back to the city in their town cars, because back then they had a budget. Chemists didn't get to go anywhere, but they didn't want to hear the science. It was all about marketing. They could care less, and I shouldn't say that for every marketer, but the general feeling was that. And then I had an opinion as a chemist, so I just kept giving them my opinion, and some VP heard, so they switched me to marketing, where I was in marketing for the L'Oreal Group. And then I realized that there's a disconnect, a huge disconnect between at L'Oreal as Clark, New Jersey versus Fifth Avenue, or now it's Hudson Yards. There's a huge disconnect between the two, and I realized, oh, maybe they stuck me into marketing because I could translate technology into something that people could maybe understand. But no one wanted to hear from the chemist in 1990. They didn't want to hear from a chemist up until like a few years ago. All of a sudden now there's all these scientists on Instagram, and they're famous, and I'm like, geez, I wish they had that when I was a young chemist. So, since I've reached out to them, and they're bringing information to the world. So you can't hide anything anymore. You just scratch the surface and everything kind of falls apart. So there's a few things that are coming, and this is what we're trying to offer. Number one is credibility. So credibility. Laboratory for Stem Cell and Tissue Engineering, Columbia University, partners with Vanderbilt, Stanford, and one other, Vanderbilt, Stanford, and Columbia, and Xilex Bio. So credibility is number one. Number two, along with credibility, is how about a lab? How about your own lab? So it was a novel thing to actually have 2 floors of the SUNY Downstate Medical Center as your R&D lab. So that is something I think as these science influencers start scratching the surface, they're asking, can I come see your lab? Can I come see your work? And can I make a reel about it? So that's something that science-based brands are going to have to spend some money on the R part of R&D, not just the D part. And R&D will need to be done in a lab and not just on Google. So that's another thing. And then formulas, library formulas. We all know, I mean, I did it for most of my career, for most of my clients, and you take the library formula and you sort of, add in a cute little ingredient and you have fun with marketing, and that's your proprietary, complex. And nowadays, those influencers are seeing right through it, and they're like, where's your ingredient? Do you have an inky ingredient? What is your complex made of? And so now you're like, oh, damn it, I can't just name a complex with existing peptides, ceramides, cholesterol, and call it my complex. We actually have to have our own inky name, that's its own ingredient that can stand up on an inky list and be the only one in the world to have it, which are the major kind peptides. So that's another thing with science-based. And then there's marketing levels, right? The sort of ingredient story where, some of us put 0.01% in of a bunch of these story ingredients, and then the marketers talk about efficacy. So now it's functional levels. So these influencers, they want to know what functional levels do you have, and then clinicals, like testing your product. Okay, we can all get hydration numbers when we test the whole formula, but when you test the actual technology, are you going to get hydration? And a lot of us know from chemistry class that when you test something, you want to test it against. You want to hold all variables equal except the thing you're testing for. So these are all things that I know most of the marketers thought were boring and didn't want to hear about, but now it seems like it's our time.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's basically all of marketing and claims and science coming together.
Yeah. And obviously informing all of that really is, right, funding. So Allie, I know you worked as an investment banker before you set up Veracity. And worked in product marketing as well for beauty brands. So I would be curious to hear just about the challenges of really financing the brand journey.
Yeah. Let's be serious. The payback for science is longer than it is for marketing-based businesses, where a lot of traditional beauty investors are used to, someone said it earlier, I'm worried about my inventory and I'm worried about my marketing, and that's it. And you can see if it works within 6 months or a year, or oftentimes less, given the virality of social media. So, but then let's look at digital health. Digital health raises a lot more money, and investors have a lot longer timeline. So if we want to be serious about health and science in beauty, we also have to realign expectations as investors and thinking about putting down more money and having a longer development time. At Veracity, we took even a year before we even launched, when we were doing more than a year, figuring out what our diagnostic would be, developing our products. Almost all of our products take over a year. And the sad thing is, to me, in this funding environment, it's counter to what the customers actually want, because now brands are required to have a certain amount of traction before they're getting key funding. Well, but how are you going to have any clinicals if you have no money? And this isn't, the type of thing where you can just bootstrap it yourself. If you're talking real science, it's at a minimum hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I think we need to be honest with ourselves. Where is the market going? And then put the capital structure in place behind that.
Yeah. Robbie, I feel like with Jupiter, it was a bit of a David and Goliath moment, right? The category you were going into, there have been sort of two key dominant players for the last couple of decades. And also, right, an anti-dandruff product, it really has to deliver. There's very little margin for error. So I'm curious to hear, how you navigated sort of re-educating the consumer, but also challenging the status quo in an existing category.
Yeah, I mean, I think the status quo is pretty low. So in many respects, there's a hurdle to achieve on the efficacy side, but then comes the experience side. And I'm sure if I polled the room and said, how many people here who have experienced dandruff or dry scalp, just by a raise of hands? Great. I know that it's a lot more than the people who actually raise their hands right now, just for the record. It's about 50 to 75% of the world, right? And when it gets to be about 50 to 75% of the world, the FDA steps in and says, we want to regulate what's going on here. So fortunately for our category, there's a monograph. So what we did is we looked at the monograph and we said, okay, what about this needs to stay and what about it can we change? So if you look at our products relative to what's on the market, it's kind of looking at like matcha and Mountain Dew and saying the only thing that's the same between the two of these is that they're both green liquids, but everything else is different. Yeah. So we took the most effective ingredients that were included in those, the brands that you're used to seeing, and we threw them out and we started over and we said, what does the modern woman really want in a product and what is she looking for? So again, in many respects, like the status quo was just so bad that we really were starting from this position of wanting better and knowing better was possible. It just was going to take a lot of hard work and time to do it. It doesn't happen overnight when you're creating it from scratch.
Yeah. And Ray, I thought you, on the prep call for this chat, you had a really beautiful quote, which was that, data is the love language of the beauty consumer. But obviously how that data is created in terms of, the representation within the testing, whether it's ethnicity, whether it's age, there's not been that much of really an update within the testing parameters, right? So I'm curious how you think, looking forward, we're going to sort of see more diversity and representation show up in the science that's informing our industry.
Absolutely. Diversity is so important. It is the future, and it needs to be represented at all levels of the creation of a brand and its products. For Mother Science, our first product was a serum called the Molecular Hero Serum featuring our malisasin. And when we tested it, we had the most rigorous clinicals of anybody I know. We did Affymetrix gene analysis of over 22,000 different genes, how they were upregulated and downregulated in ex vivo skin. To a certain degree, there is a lot of agnostic data. Human skin does human things when you test them. But then when it came time to actually test on people, we made sure that we included all Fitzpatrick skin tones in our testing. That was especially important because malisasin, one of our claims is that it is really good at hyperpigmentation and helping that area. And traditionally, lighter Fitzpatrick's tones are used in the clinical studies because they show easier results. And the darker Fitzpatrick tones actually have a harder time finding hyperpigmentation products that are effective. And we made sure that we were indexing to test the most difficult skin tones that were not traditionally represented in these kinds of tests. And then moving forward, we did have a really big developmental budget and rigorous testing, but no beauty company can include every single race, every ethnicity, every age the way that we want to. And that's where I look to citizen science. Basically, when your product is distributed throughout the world and people are curious about a new ingredient and want to learn about it and then want to share what they've used, you start seeing really diverse representation. You can see everybody saying, I used this, this is what I saw. And to me, that's the community of citizen scientists that we want to build. We want a world where people talk transparently and with joy about products that are working for them, products that are transformative to them, that are landscape changing, the next generation product, and have them share their own experience. Because all of us here in the room who love beauty, at the heart we're scientists. We understand biology, we understand chemistry, and sharing the data that we have with everybody is how we build a better and bigger community.
Yeah. Just on the subject of testing, Robbie, I was curious because, consumer testing and clinical testing, right? They both have their place. One's about very, strict parameters, and consumer testing obviously relates the efficacy of your product in a very relatable way to the consumer. How do you see those two interacting with each other over the next 5 to 10 years, the relationship between?
Sure. The answer is I don't know the answer. I think what we're going to see is certainly that testing is hopefully going to become cheaper and more accessible. Talking about citizen scientists, I think there is a demand and there's an interest to making it more accessible, so there is more innovation. Certainly, they're both very important, right? One is actually showing the factual, and the other one is the experience. And it's important that they go hand in hand, and that the customer is actually appreciating the science through their experience. Other than that, I just think it's going to be, again, a little bit more democratized.
Yeah. And Allie, for you, obviously, the brand name really means a commitment to truth, right? I'm curious in terms of relating that truth and building that trust with your customer outside of clinical testing. Obviously, you have such an expansive range of medical experts on your board. Curious to hear about that.
Yeah, as consumers have demanded more science-backed, you walk into a Sephora and every single brand has a clinical test of some kind or another. And so what we think about is look, we're not just putting root cause or hormones as a trendy word. We are truly putting our money where our mouth is, and that's how you build the brand and build the authenticity behind it. For a lot of our clients, they come in and they order a supplement, but we're also giving them lifestyle advice that can maximize the performance of that supplement. And then we also offer hormone testing so they can go further. And we also offer holistic nutritional counseling so they can actually get answers. So to me, it's about thinking of the convergence between, it's nice to have clinicals, but that is just one, as Robbie was saying, it's kind of one piece of the pie of proving to somebody that something works, right? They also want to know client testimonials. They want to see tutorials. They want to see all these different pieces. So, when I think about how we really support that beyond just numbers on a website, it's how do I be there for my client? And how do I help them in a way that's not just everyone knows stress affects your skin and your weight and your body and every way you present yourself, but they don't know how to get rid of it, right? And so, and especially, I have young kids. When someone tells me not to be stressed, it's you want to put a finger to them. But really, it's how can I give people actionable steps to try for themselves and help make their lives better? Because ultimately, when they're healthier, they're going to look better in every kind of way.
And Alec and Anne-Marie, obviously, both of your brands have these roots in the pharma world, and I find the kind of convergence of pharma and beauty such a fascinating subject. But although with yours, it goes even further, really, in terms of just it really being a pharma approach to beauty rather than a convergence. But how important do you think it is that brands own the IP to their ingredients or the technologies they use? Would you like to start?
Owning IP protects your most valuable asset. Your technology is what gives you an unfair advantage when you come into a really crowded beauty space. And for us, I kind of buried the plot. We do have a pharma background. So when I discovered the patches of my skin that were affected by microbiome imbalance, and I deep dove it and discovered malisasin, I was primarily interested in how there was an anti-inflammatory response. Anti-inflammatory molecules are really, really important in drug development, specifically with cancer. Using the inspiration from that molecule, we created a separate company called Versicolor Technologies, where we investigate melanoma drugs. And a therapeutic approach is very different than the approach that you use to develop beauty products. We have a firewall between the two companies for the obvious reason of the FDA protocol. You cannot animal test on a beauty product. You're required to for a therapeutic. So we had 8 years of research and licensed molecules that had never been tested on animals, and that's We had one molecule, the malisasin, the original one found on the microbiome in nature. We knew that we could get a formulation patent for that so that nobody else could use that molecule in any formulation. And we knew the highest purpose of that molecule was for skincare, that it was a next generation antioxidant, 10 times more powerful than vitamin C. We have the therapeutic data to show exactly what it is doing and why it is so good for the skin barrier. And the unfair advantage of being able to get this technology from our therapeutics company and then start a cosmetic company and be able to peek behind the curtain and see all of this very, very rigorous data with scientists that have literally invented drugs that are the standard of care for heart disease and cancer working on our team. So I feel like owning IP is so important. Without owning your IP, I feel like you have to tell a different story. You can't just tell the science story. You can't say, here's our molecule. And it's such a privilege and also a fun challenge to say, we have a molecule. And learn about it. It's the next generation, and only we can tell that story because we're the ones that own it, and it's valuable. Yeah, it's important. Yeah. I'd love to hear your response on owning IP as well.
Yeah, IP has been the bane of my existence for the last 9 months legally as we negotiated funding. And I first will say, not everyone has to be super science, you know? I mean, we are the beauty industry. I mean, there's lifestyle skincare brand. I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of people just want to get moisturization and, you know, a little repair, and they like, you know, they love the branding and they love the packaging, and so why not, right? Those things are great, and if you can own your IP, great. If you don't have particular IP, then, you know, have fun with it, create a community, and have a hugely successful brand. Mm-hmm. That would be, I would love that actually, but but I'm not good at that. So IP for us is extremely important because we are a quote-unquote science-based brand. So it's kind of a requirement to be science-based, I think. And in order to get investment, I just started full-time on this job 3 weeks, no, maybe 6 weeks ago. I quit my full-time job.
Wow.
Yes, and I can work full-time on this instead of nights and weekends, but that's because we got investors a couple weeks after launching. We started speaking to different investors, and we got a really great one, and we got funding in early July. But it was 9 months of, I don't know how many law firms, and because our technology, it had to stay in medicine, and the VC or PE demanded that it be, and their law firms demanded that the IP be assigned to the brand. And I'm assuming because they want to be able to exit it at one point, and they want the IP to go with it. Yeah. And so it's not just, the IP is not just like, wow, isn't it great? It's like, you know, it's a business. Yeah. And so $600,000 later in legal fees, because there was no way that Xilex was going to give up. I mean, they're working on human trials of tissue engineering human organs. They weren't, so they finally figured out a way to assign the cosmetic part of this technology to beauty. So I would say, and many times those law firms were screaming at each other, and the deal almost fell through a few times. Yeah. But finally they reached a good point, and that's going to differentiate us, I guess, from the VC and PE side in terms of an exit at one point. And that's why when I see the support from them, all about IP, that's why in our R&D plan, because we actually have a budget for the R part of D, and that means technologies that are coming in 3, 5, and 7 years from now. So we're very much focused on IP and protecting it.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to say something controversial to everything that we've said here.
Yeah.
Is that I think that there's science for science sake, and then there's science because it works, right? And I think everything that we're saying today is that there's science that works with the brands, right? But At the end of the day, what we know is that everybody's skin is different, right? And everybody has different reactions. So at the end of the day, it has to work for the customer. And that's what we're really here for. Because if it doesn't work, but you have great science, who cares, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's where the trials come in and where we're going to continue to invest. But it has to be practical science and that it's actually working for our customers.
Yeah. Just before we turn it over to the audience, I just wanted to do a little quick fire round, which is obviously, you know, a lot of our industry thrives on newness and the idea of launching products kind of as fast as they appear on as trends on TikTok. So sort of in a sentence or two, you know, what was it like going up against that kind of traditional trajectory and timeline, really, of the industry?
We go at the speed of science, and science can sometimes be slow. Sometimes it takes months for them to grow the 3D tissue samples that you need to test for a key molecule. And we accept that pace, and it's worked to our benefit. When we first started developing malisasin and analogs thereof, it was years ago before clinical beauty was cool. And we were able to come out with all of the data that we needed and the perfect positioning to launch our brand at a time that happened to be optimal. So it's worked in our favor that it took a while, and the pace of science dictates everything for us.
Yeah.
For me, it's maddening. I don't know. There's no other word except for maddening. The time it takes is maddening. But it is chemistry. It is biology. It takes time, and you have to wait and you have to test. I wish it could go faster, but you know, good things come to those who wait. So.
Yeah.
It's like the tortoise and the hare. It's like you have to know that you may not always get out in front, but like because you have products that are going to work better, that's how you get the retention, and that's how you have a big sustainable business.
Totally.
Sorry, the question was.
What was it like going up against the traditional like
yes.
timelines and trajectories?
Okay,
of the
so we
industry?
cheated a bit because Xilex Bio out of Columbia, they had already spent 8 years and over $10 million developing the technology, so it was done.
Yeah.
And so it was very quick for me because I've been developing product for 30 years and I know all the secrets, shortcuts. So that's okay. And then now we just have things in the pipeline R&D wise, several projects over the next 10 years because it takes at least 5, 8, 10 years to come up with something. And the reason is because most of the time it fails. So, you know, they went through, you know, exosomes, growth factor. I mean, they work with them on a daily basis. They worked with stem cell conditioned media. They worked with, and also the matrikines, which are extracted from the extracellular matrix of different organs, and in our case, upcycled bovine bone, to find the perfect one. And many of them failed, right? So once you get the technology, it's really fast. It's just development. It's the D part of the R, and then as long as you just have R in the pipeline, and you set aside a budget and you're serious about it, and you have the appropriate people working on it, then coming to market with versions or vehicles of that technology is not hard.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Thanks so much. I would love to open it up to the audience for a question or two in case anybody's curious, wants to ask. Yeah, Vanessa.
Hi, I'm sitting here fascinated and my mind is kind of spinning because I'm always like in this dream space and I have all these ideas of what I want to do and how I want it to work, and a dream would be to have IP that I own. But where do you start? Like, who do I go to? Who is this chemist? Is that chemist has to be somebody who's on my staff? Like what's like 1 and 2 steps? If I could just have those two.
Is that for you or for anybody?
Yeah. All right.
I mean, I can jump in on my side, and I've never been afraid to look stupid. I mean, granted, what I'm doing today is like, I think the answer is you have to just be comfortable being in a room and asking questions that may, yeah, exactly. It's giving yourself, being a little bit vulnerable and just start asking questions to the people around you, and ultimately it'll lead you to the right person or the wrong person. I think you had such a great point earlier of things failing, right? You're gonna fail in a partnership, you're gonna fail in a commercial partnership. I think the goal is really to find that person who you feel like there's a good fit from an outlook on where you want your business or where you want your product to go. and trying to hedge yourself enough where you're not betting the farm on that individual or betting your farm on that entity. But yes, finding a chemist is incredibly difficult because right now the chemists are really in high demand, so they have their pick of the litter of what to work on and what to work, what companies they want to work with, for sure.
Yeah, just to add to that really briefly, like Robbie and I aren't scientists. I started my company. We have 11 doctors. Through that partnership, you get what you can need to deliver to the client. So it is about finding the right partners.
Danessa, I just want to say, I feel like when you have real innovation, it comes from asking questions and following hunches and making observations and just having imaginative conversation with people who can help you. I would love to have that conversation with you later. And every scientist and every person who's helped us, I want to share them with you because you're amazing. I'm a huge fan of what you've done and what you've built. And I feel like your creativity is going to lead. You've been innovating from the beginning. It's funny that you say like you want to find innovation because you've always been innovating. And I know that your trajectory of innovation is just going to go higher and higher. I'd love to introduce you to the chemists that we know and the scientists that we know. You probably already know them because you're so well connected, but I want to just offer my network to you.
Yeah. Any other? Oh, yeah.
This question is for Mother Science. So when you were writing your patents, were you writing them? Your team, was it scientists? I mean, obviously you have patent attorneys who help file all of this, but who was really writing the science behind it?
So the first call that we made when I had the epiphany that Malisazen had a backbone to be something powerful, we made a call to Proskauer. They are a patent attorney office that has a really good life sciences division. I wrote the prospectus myself for them. I pulled all of the data that was already present. They were able to research really quickly and find that there was a white space in the molecule that we had, which is very rare, by the way. A lot of times molecular innovation, when you come up with a molecule, there's somebody who's already patented and then built a fortress around it. When we found out that Malisazen had nothing in the patent space, we knew that we had to follow the opportunity. The prospectus gave them the background literature on what had already been done in that microbiomic area so that we could reference that and then build out the experiments that we needed to really create a strong patent. They advised us on what we needed to do, the experiments that we needed to have, the data that we needed to have, the analogs we needed to synthesize around it to build our fortress of IP, which also gives us a pipeline of innovation for years to come. We have 50 plus molecules patented. And Proskauer, I really recommend them if you're looking for a patent attorney that will stand by your side and guide you through how you go from an idea to real technology that protects the value of your company.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for questions, but I'm sure any of you would love to chat one-on-one if there's any more questions. Thank you so much for this, for this panel. Thank you.